just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. The legend continues.
Main event of the evening.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, it's the one you've all been waiting for.
Yep.
It is Hollywood Part 3.
Okay, Peter. Tell us what happens in Hollywood Part 3.
We open back in Milwaukee, where Al is reading a postcard he got from Richie, recapping the events of Parts 1 and 2.
Life is funny.
Back in Hollywood, Richie and Nancy are kissing on the beach, with Richie comparing it to From Here to Eternity.
We're Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr.
Well, which one am I?
Nancy says he's a terrific guy, and maybe they'll run into each other again sometime. She meant to tell him earlier, but her oceanography class is going on a cruise for practical experience in Pango Pango, and they're leaving tomorrow morning. Richie is dejected, but understands. Nancy kisses him goodbye and leaves. Ralph and Potsy run up to Richie to tell him the news. The California kid has challenged Fonzie to another contest. Fonzie wants Richie to drive him, and Fonzie is going to jump over a shark. They repeat that last part multiple times.
Fonzie's gonna jump over a shark.
Fonz is gonna jump over a shark.
And they're gonna jump over a shark.
Because they really want you to rock that Fonzie is jumping over a shark. Richie confronts Fonzie, calling the stunt the stupidest thing he's ever heard. Fonzie agrees, but says it's something he has to do. Richie points out this isn't jumping over garbage cans on his bike, this is jumping over a shark on two little skis. One slip and chomp chomp chomp. Plus, the kid is probably bluffing. Nevertheless, Fonzie insists he has to meet his bluff.
I ain't going back to Milwaukee a double failure.
Fonzie and Richie rejoin the crowd gathered around the California kid, and Fonzie accepts the challenge. He has a condition, though. The kid goes first. The kid, spurred on by chicken sounds from the crowd, agrees, much to Georgie's annoyance. Everyone gathers on the pier to watch the jump, with Howard and Marion joining Joni later, because Marion was buying souvenirs. Joni begs her parents to stop Fonzie from doing the jump. Howard's not sure what she wants him to do. Talk to the shark?
Oh, Howard, would you?
On the water, as the kid prepares to do his jump, Georgie says, "This is ridiculous." Nevertheless, the kid skis. But he evidently took his friend's words to heart, because he lets go of the rope and sinks into the water before he can jump. Richie, Potsy, and Ralph congratulate Fonzie. Now he doesn't have to do the jump, except he's going to do it anyway. He asks Richie if he's going to drive him or not. Richie says no. Fonzie tells Ralph to drive for him, and Ralph says this time he'll remember to untie it. Richie, realizing that Fonzie will definitely die if Ralph is driving, steps in to say he will drive. Though he does point out that Fonzie has already won by forfeit.
You don't win stuff by forfeit. That's not what they told me in Little League, Fonz.
Fonzie says this isn't a game, and again asks if Richie is driving him. Richie says he is. But if Fonzie gets his legs bit off by that shark, he'd better not come running to Richie. Fonzie skis across the water as everyone watches in rapt horror, half convinced he won't actually do it, as the shark lurks below the waves. As they get closer, Richie turns and shouts for Fonzie to tell him if he really wants to do this. Fonzie gives him a thumbs up, and then we cut to commercial.
Stay tuned for more Happy Days.
When we return, Fonzie readies himself to make the jump as everyone watches in shock. And Fonzie makes the jump, leaping gracefully across the sky like a gazelle on water skis, and returns to the beach to be greeted by a cheering crowd. Georgie, who had suggested the challenge in the first place, admits to the kid that he made a mistake in assuming Fonzie would chicken out. Fonzie tells Richie they won. How often does a guy like Fonzie get to beat a guy like the kid, with a fancy boat and custom skis and a Porsche? He says the kid's not like him and Richie. The two of them are doers. Richie asks if that means they have to accept every challenge. Fonzie says he's a flexible guy, and as he was shooting over that shark, something his grandfather said came back to him. Richie would do well to remember it on the ladder to stardom.
Life is filled with challenges. You take them all, except those that are gonna break your neck.
Richie thinks Fonzie knew the whole time that he was going to make it. Deep down, he knew Fonzie was going to make it too. He just wasn't sure the shark knew. Back at the Hollywood Palms, Richie is going over the contract with Howard, Marion, and Joni. Richie's a little hesitant at losing 5 years of his life. Marion wants to know if they'll all be moving to Hollywood. Howard thinks Richie would be fine on his own, and Joni says, just to be safe, they should send her to keep an eye on him. Richie notes there's no guarantee of success or stardom. Joni says it doesn't matter whether Richie goes or stays. Mom and Dad will always have her. Howard tells her to go to the beach.
I'm sent to the beach. I love California.
But you stay away from that Sandy character and all those muscle men.
Marion tells Richie she loves him, and she believes he will be a star. Then she goes to the gift shop to buy driftwood. Howard rambles about how Marion wants him to build a lamp out of driftwood, despite him not knowing how to. Richie isn't paying attention. He's too nervous. Howard apologizes for getting carried away about this Hollywood thing. He and Marion always planned for Richie to go to college, and he's already registered. But that doesn't mean Richie shouldn't take the contract. Sometimes, Howard wishes he was Ozzie Nelson. Then he could just say, "You're going to college, and that's final." But the best Howard can do is just talk it out. Richie doesn't really want Howard to tell him what to do, does he? Richie admits it's his life, and it has to be his decision. Howard says that whatever his decision is, he'll be proud of him. Richie is his son, and he's never given Howard any cause to be anything but proud. On the pier, Richie is looking at the contract as Fonzie watches from afar. Then Richie throws the contract into the water. Fonzie joins Richie, and Richie says that being a movie star isn't his dream. Being a journalist is. People are going to think he's bananas. Fonzie tells him the important thing is to do what he wants to do, not what he thinks other people think he should do. He's going to spend a lot of time doing it, after all. A lot of people might not want to get their fingernails dirty, but Fonzie loves being an auto mechanic, and that's what's cool. Then they walk down the beach together.
I like hanging out with college men.
You mean it's good for your image to be with intelligent, educated guys like us?
No. I mean, it's a great new way to meet college chicks.
Back in Milwaukee, Al and Chachi are inside Arnold's after closing when they're joined by the returning Cunninghams and Ralph and Potsy. Chachi flirts with Joni and gets a souvenir shirt from Hollywood.
Thanks, everybody. Especially you, Blue Eyes.
Chachi gives Fonzie some phone numbers to call back, then leaves. Al passive-aggressively brings up how his so-called friends left for Hollywood without him.
It's good when you have friends who bring presents, especially when you don't go anywhere yourself. It's so nice when they do that.
And Howard gives him a souvenir seashell with Hollywood on the side. Ralph and Potsy give Al the souvenir he wanted them to get, which they urge him to put on. A pair of Mickey Mouse ears from Disneyland. As Ralph and Potsy leave, Ralph wonders how he'll tell his mother he busted her ironing board, and Potsy wonders how he'll tell his father he's back. The Cunninghams say goodbye to Al and leave, though Al takes Richie aside to ask if they really do put lettuce and tomato on their burgers in Hollywood. Richie says, sometimes even mayonnaise.
Yeah, that's glamorous.
The episode ends with Fonzie turning off the lights, taking a picture of himself off the wall, and looking around at the diner, with an A.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was the infamous Hollywood Part 3, which first aired back on September 20th, 1977. That night, Happy Days served as a lead-in to the Season 3 premiere of Laverne and Shirley, in which the girls have to land a plane in an emergency. CBS countered with a brand new show, The Fitzpatricks, an hour-long drama about a blue-collar family from my hometown of Flint, Michigan. The show was clobbered in the ratings by Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and was canceled after just 13 weeks. It's best remembered today for featuring a young Helen Hunt as the family's next-door neighbor. And NBC had another episode of The Richard Pryor Show, this time featuring a parody of To Kill a Mockingbird.
You know how slippery they are.
Slippery is the key word, Your Honor. Slip or read.
And other sketches. Hollywood Part 3 was directed by our friend Jerry Paris, and it was written by Fred Fox Jr. Last season, Fred wrote A Shot in the Dark and co-wrote Spunky Come Home. In 2010, Fred did an interview with NPR station KCRW about writing the infamous Jump the Shark episode.
Incredibly, the reading of the script, no one, and we were breaking the story, and no one said, "Are we out of our mind? We're having Fonzie jump a shark?"
He said the original idea may have come from Gary Marshall or from showrunner Bob Brunner. Fred was simply the person assigned to take the idea and make a script out of it. He felt the stigma attached to the episode was unfair and that Happy Days had done some of its best episodes after Hollywood Part 3 while remaining a huge rating success. But Fred had a good sense of humor about the whole thing.
It's it's just so fascinating that it's the phrase in the Oxford English Dictionary. And
do you ever find yourself using it?
No, because I'd have to pay myself a residual, I think.
As for guest stars this week, nobody new. James Doughton, Lorette Spang, Talia Balsam, David Agris, and James Van Patten are all back from last week. Did any of these wonderful people make a better impression on you the second time?
Not really, no.
We got a little bit more of James Van Patten as Sandy, I thought.
Did we?
Well, he gets a name, and he gets some lines.
We get to see more of his interesting haircut.
And we get Howard telling Joni to stay away from that Sandy.
Never trust a man with a page boy haircut.
Songs, not really any in the version that I watched. There is one generic oldie used at Arnold's, but I think it's one of those copyright-free replacement songs that are sometimes used on Happy Days.
When in doubt, kiss me and you'll find out. Yeah.
Were there any songs in your version of the episode?
No, there were not. There were commercials, though. The version I was watching was recorded when this episode aired on TV Land, so there was stuff like a little Quizlet about which actress didn't win an Emmy for playing identical twins. And it turns out that Elizabeth Montgomery never won an Emmy, which is bullshit because she was great and she deserved to win one.
As for cultural and historical references this week, that postcard that says Hollywood, the Glamour City, is very real. It was a commercially available postcard created by Mytok and Sons of Sherman Oaks, California. It shows a nighttime view of Hollywood from Mulholland Drive. Supposedly you can see the Hollywood Bowl, the Hollywood Freeway, Hollywood and Vine, and the Capitol Records building. Postcard seems to date from about the mid-1960s. From Here to Eternity is the Oscar-winning 1953 war drama that Happy Days has previously referenced in Rotsey, The Other Richie Cunningham, and Fonzie the Flatfoot. For the record, it's a romantic World War II drama about the months leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Stars include Burt Lancaster, Deborah Carr, Montgomery Clift, Frank Sinatra, Donna Reed, and Ernest Borgnine. Richie mentions a famous love scene on the beach between Lancaster and Carr, who allegedly had an off-screen affair as well.
The scene on the beach might have looked idyllic and is now a classic, but it was very far from comfortable. She said every orifice was filled with sand.
It is common for oceanography students to do field work, so Nancy's story ostensibly still holds up, even though I doubt UCLA is sending students to Pango Pango.
Do you think that she was lying?
Possibly, yeah. It's because UCLA is not even one of the top oceanography schools, so they're definitely not sending people to American Samoa.
Do you think her whole story was a lie? Do you think she's really an oceanography student? Is Nancy Croft even her real name? Is she actually related to the California Kid?
I think the part that's real is that she is related to the California Kid. That part felt real to me because when you're in a family with somebody, you begin to accept all of their eccentricities.
And she's pretty accepting of the California Kid. Yeah, he's just like that.
She's inured to him by now. Pango Pango is the capital of American Samoa, a small territorial island in the South Pacific. It's about 4,800 miles from Los Angeles and a whopping 6,500 miles from Milwaukee. She chose a good place if she wanted to stay as far away from Richie as she possibly could. Thanks to that aforementioned interview with Fred Fox Jr., I know that the beach scenes for this three-parter were shot out in Malibu, about 30 miles west of Hollywood. Hollywood is not actually on the beach. It's in the middle of Los Angeles. How are they possibly walking from their motel to the beach?
It's a very long walk.
Fonzie calls Harold Prince Valiant. This is an action-adventure comic set during Arthurian times that has been running since 1937. It was originally created by a Canadian named Hal Foster. The title character is known for his shoulder-length page boy haircut, which some have deemed effeminate.
It's effeminate.
It's effeminate?
I think it's a little effeminate.
How is this effeminate?
I don't know. It just is.
The shark jumping stunt was supposedly inspired by a planned real-life stunt by Evel Knievel. The Daredevil said that he would jump over a swimming pool filled with sharks for a primetime special on CBS. Unfortunately, he injured himself during a botched practice run, so Evel Knievel never actually jumped the shark. Fonz went where Evel Knievel couldn't.
Yeah, suck it, Evel Knievel. Do you think that in the Fonzie-verse, Evel Knievel was inspired to do his shark jump by Legends of Fonzie's shark jump, only he couldn't live up to his legend?
Possibly. The term jump the shark was coined in 1985 by radio personality John Hine, who was best known for his work with Howard Stern.
I was at a party and somebody used the phrase, "Oh, did the show jump the shark?"
Yeah.
And I said, a guy who works with me, this guy John Hine, he started that.
While he was at the University of Michigan, Hine was discussing TV shows that had overstayed their welcome, and his roommate identified this very episode as the point when Happy Days began its creative decline. Hine then began cataloging other such episodes from various TV shows, and he created a Jump the Shark website in 1997. That site spawned 2 books and was eventually sold for an estimated $1 million. JumpTheShark.com currently redirects to TV Guide. The phrase Jump the Shark has become so associated with Happy Days that the producers even had to acknowledge it in the 30th anniversary special from 2005.
And all the incredible barrel-leaping, bull-riding, shark-jumping action.
Shark. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Gary Marshall has talked about this in interviews. Bob Brunner has talked about it. Ron Howard has talked about it. Henry Winkler has talked about it. Henry is tired of answering questions about jumping the shark. Please stop asking him about this. He has been a good sport about it to the extent that any human being could possibly be.
There are so many other things you could ask him about.
During the shark jump, Marion is holding plastic cups featuring the Disney characters Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck.
Mickey Mouse! Mickey Mouse!
One pink, one blue, presumably for Joni and Richie. These cups were manufactured by a company called Eagle in the 1970s. Porsche is a line of high-performance German sports cars manufactured since 1931. We actually saw the California Kid's car back in part 2. I would say that it's a Porsche 356 convertible from about 1960. Richie's movie star salary of $200 a week would be over $1,700 a week in today's money. Joni says that Richie could buy
50 new Big Bopper albums every 7 days.
By her calculations, then, the average LP costs $4, or the modern-day equivalent of $35. And that is fairly accurate. LPs range from about $3 to $4 a piece back then.
My only question is, why would you want 50 new Big Bopper albums? I only know the one song from him.
Hello, baby.
Did he have many others? I mean, no disrespect to the Big Bopper, Chantilly Lace is a very fun song, but why would you want that many Big Bopper songs?
I think part of that is a little ironic because of this next fact. Texas singer-songwriter and disc jockey J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, only ever recorded one full-length album in 1958.
Oh, Lord, you can live a dad from the life there. Also, live a donor from the belly of the whale. And now, Hebrew children from the fiery furnace. So the good book do declare, oh, Lord, if you can't help me, for goodness sake, don't help that bow.
He famously died in a plane crash in February 1959, about 5 months after his breakthrough single, Chantilly Lace. So there would never have been even 2 albums by the Big Bopper, let alone 50 of them. Happy Days must take place in an alternate universe where the Big Bopper wasn't on the plane, or maybe the day the music died never happened.
So the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly and Richie Valens are all still alive?
And apparently very, very prolific. But I was shocked that you were paying about the equivalent of $25 to $35 for an album back then, so buying an LP was no joke in the 1950s.
It was a commitment.
Erin Moran says that she loves California, which is appropriate since she and Anson Williams are both native Californians. Howard says he wishes he were Ozzie Nelson. Ozzie, of course, played a fictionalized version of himself on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, a sitcom that started on radio in 1944. The TV version began in 1952 and ran until 1966.
Here they are, America's favorite family, the Nelsons. Tonight's Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet is brought to you by your gas company, who help you and your family live modern for less with gas.
That's what we do at our house.
The weekly series featured Ozzie's real-life wife and children all playing themselves. And despite what Howard says here, the TV Ozzie was notoriously a wishy-washy pushover type of guy who never seemed to leave the house. Disneyland has long sold souvenir hats with mouse ears on them. These are replicas of the hats worn by the Mouseketeers on the Mickey Mouse Club TV show starting in 1955. They were originally designed by Roy Williams, a regular on the show known as Big Roy.
Hi, Mouseketeers.
Hi, Roy. What you doing, Roy?
Oh, just practicing drawing some of the characters.
Other observations. I thought that having Al read the postcard from Richie was a fairly painless way of doing a recap of parts 1 and 2.
Yeah, I just got a card from the gang in Hollywood. Not from your cousin Fonzie. This is from Richie.
I thought that was a really nice method. I like the implication that Al and Richie are friends and they keep in touch and they tell each other stuff. It makes the final scene where Al is kind of being humored by everyone else and treated like a slightly doofy acquaintance that they're humoring. It makes that final scene a little bit less sad because at least Al has one friend who might respect him.
It was almost to me like they didn't know what to do with Nancy, the oceanography student, so they got rid of her character in the most awkward, arbitrary way possible.
Yeah, it's a real Jennifer at the beginning of Back to the Future Part 2. Oh shit, we got a sequel. We set up this female character being a big part of it. Get her away. Get her away!
Doc, what the hell are you doing?
Relax, Marty. It's just a sleep-inducing alpha rhythm generator. She was asking too many questions and no one should know too much about their future. This way, when she wakes up, she'll think it was all a dream.
Then what did you bring her for?
I had to do something. She saw a time machine. I couldn't just leave her there without information.
We were so focused on the actual shark jumping that we did not appreciate the brilliant strategic maneuver by Fonzie calling Harold's bluff and making him go first. At first, I didn't know why he was insisting that Harold go first, but it all made sense in the end. I wonder what the California Kid's life was like after this incident. His whole thing is being the coolest guy on the beach, and now he's been shown up by this out-of-towner. No one's going to respect him anymore. What's going to happen to the California Kid after this?
He sinks into depression, he loses everything, and then he finds religion, and now he runs a yoga studio just outside of Los Angeles.
I will accept that answer. Fred Fox said that he and fellow writer Brian Levant did briefly discuss whether Fonzie jumping a shark was too much, but they figured that viewers would accept it since Fonz had previously jumped over trash cans in Fearless Fonzarelli. Fox also said that the idea to do a 3-part season opener was a mandate from ABC and Paramount since Fonzie Loves Pinky had been such a success. Hollywood, parts 1 through 3, was a similar ratings bonanza for the network. Fox said that it got a 50 share, meaning half the country was watching.
That's the power of the shark jump.
Absolutely. So it was nothing to be ashamed of at the time. Right before the jump, a female voice says,
"He's really gonna do it!"
But no one's mouth is moving on screen. Who is actually saying this?
Maybe it's a ghost.
Somebody who tried the jump earlier and didn't make it.
Yes, and now she's haunting the beach like something out of a teen death song.
Tragedy.
Based on his little monologue about making lamps, Howard seems rather mechanically inept for someone who runs a hardware store. Did the writers forget that this was his livelihood, or is the joke supposed to be that Howard sells hardware without actually knowing how to use it?
I suspect that it might be just a case of the writers not knowing how lamps work, and them just kind of transferring that lack of knowledge to Howard.
Richie has never given Howard cause to be anything other than proud. How about the time he came home drunk accompanied by a stripper? Or the time he sent Patsy Weber as his replacement on a blind date? Or the time he lost his money playing cards with the frat boys? What about the entire Richie the Sea fiasco?
I thought it was a nice moment. He's saying that he loves his son and is proud of him unconditionally. That's very sweet.
It is a sweet moment. It's a very nice speech, and it's a nicely played bit of acting by Tom Bosley. But
the inaccuracy bothers you?
It does. I think Howard's memory is a little selective here because Richie has done some stuff. You can't be proud of Richie the Sea. That was not a proud moment for anyone. One of the car hops at Arnold's actually gets a name. Rosa.
Hooray.
Even though Chachi makes it gross within seconds.
Yeah.
He has this whole thing about, do you know what Rosa does for me?
Do you know what she does for me?
Rosa? From my parish? What?
She puts chocolate, hot fudge, and butterscotch on my sundaes.
Shut up, Chachi.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to say shut up, Chachi many, many more times in episodes to come.
Well, speaking of which, they're still pushing that wah, wah, wah catchphrase with both Chachi and Al saying it. But does Chachi, Chachi, Chachi become a catchphrase as well?
God, I hope not.
So, Peter, I will ask, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions in this episode?
The outfit that sticks with me the most is Richie's yellow shorts and red and black striped shirt combo. It just feels sort of iconic to me, and I can't quite explain why.
So did you have any other observations that you wanted to make about Hollywood Part 3?
This episode is surprisingly a lot more emotional than I expected, considering that it is the shark jumping episode. Like, you've got Howard reaffirming his son's agency and telling him that no matter what he chooses, him and Marion love him and are proud of him. And then you've got both of the scenes where Fonzie and Richie are just talking about what Richie is going to do, and Fonzie telling Richie that no matter what he does, if he does what he loves, that'll be cool. Yeah, this episode was surprisingly more emotional than I expected, considering the first two episodes.
The thing that will surprise people who revisit Hollywood Part 1, 2, and 3 is that the shark jumping actually happens pretty early in Part 3, and it isn't even the main conflict of the episode. The episode is actually about something else.
Yeah, but it is definitely what they were counting on to bring in viewers, which is why they constantly use the phrase, jumping the shark, in this episode.
They do. They were really helping out internet comedians of the future because they cannot stop saying jumping the shark.
Part of me does wonder if having Fonzie actually jump the shark was a character misstep, because all the way back in Season 3, in Fearless Fonzarelli, the moral of that two-parter was that jumping over all of those garbage cans was a stupid, stupid thing, and it got Fonzie injured. And then in this episode, Fonzie jumps a shark, and he comes away from it none the worse for wear. And even Richie, who thought that it was a stupid, dangerous thing to do, and Fonzie had no real reason to do it other than his stupid, stupid pride, tells Fonzie that, yeah, he knew Fonzie was going to make it the whole time.
Well, it is a little bit of inconsistent messaging on the part of Happy Days. Fred Fox was obviously familiar with Fearless Fonzarelli, but there really was no reason other than pride for Fonz to jump that shark. I do think that Richie had some reservations about it, even afterwards. He doesn't seem to have any lingering pride in his friend's accomplishment. You brought up the fact that Fonz felt he needed to do this, and I think one of the more emotional moments for me of this entire three-parter was when Fonz says that he didn't want to go home to Milwaukee a double failure, and I was like, oh, wow, that is rough.
So, would this episode have been stronger if it had instead been about Fonzie learning to accept his mistakes? Or would it have been better if he had gotten badly injured and learned a lesson about not doing stupid things yet again? again?
I would have to say that television is a visual medium, and sometimes you have to just do what actually looks best on screen.
Yeah.
And in this case, the thing that looks best on screen is having Fonzie's stuntman go flying majestically over that shark. I don't know what the episode is really trying to say message-wise, other than it's cool sometimes to see people do stunts.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that.
So, Peter, I will ask that age-old timeless question. Was this episode any good?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was kind of confused messaging-wise and inconsistent with earlier episodes, which is kind of par for the course with Happy Days, which is not super big on continuity, as evidenced by the strange disappearance of Charles Cunningham.
I hear they got a pretty stiff hazing. Of course, nothing like a college frat.
But there were some moments that I really did like, and while I wish that they had found a way to make Fonzie jumping the shark not just this weird symbol of his pride and his need to prove himself, and I wish that it didn't validate that by having him succeed and become a hero for it. I'm not gonna lie, I had a lot of fun watching this episode, and I think it was the most enjoyable of the Hollywood three-parter. If you're gonna watch the opening episodes of Happy Days and you just want to skip the first two parts and go right to this one, you're not gonna miss much.
I would still say Loyal to Hollywood Part 2 because it has the screen test and it has the director of the screen test. I like that whole sequence, but you're right. For the most part, you can probably just skip all of this other than the 5-minute clip of Fonzie literally jumping the shark, and you can find that everywhere. Just type in Fonzie jumps the shark and you can find clips of that all over the place. I don't think there's any need for viewers to invest 90 minutes of their life in Hollywood Part 1, 2, and 3. You know, the thing about a jump is you have to go up in the air, but then you have to land safely. And I wonder if Happy Days can land safely after this jump. Can they get back to doing more human-sized stories or more realistic stories or more grounded stories? I guess that's something that we'll have to see in Season 5 as it progresses. Will Happy Days ever be able to come back home again? After you jump the shark, what then? I will ask you, at this point, is Happy Days able to go back to doing more normal type stories, or is this a permanent change in direction for the show?
Well, it definitely tried, but at the same time, there are also a lot more kind of ridiculous episodes. I feel like there are more ratings grab episodes, and there are more heightened episodes, like when Susie Quattro shows up as Leather Tuscadero, or when Richie meets an alien who wants to kidnap him, or when that alien comes back for a clip show.
I saw this article about the craziest episodes of Happy Days, and they said there's ones that are way crazier than Hollywood Part 3, including one where Chachi sells his soul.
Oh yeah, that happens. Spoiler alert, but it's all just a dream.
And there's one where Fonzie fakes his death to avoid the mafia.
That one's a two-parter.
And there's apparently a musical episode as well where they're all singing and dancing.
Yeah, there's a musical episode which is all about Fonzie teaching Chachi about the history of immigration.
So the show got way bigger than Hollywood Part 3, or they got way crazier than Hollywood Part 3. So that's what I'm just going to keep tabs on. Is the show able to do more intimate human stories? And I think they were trying to come back down to earth in the second half of this episode, because it's mostly heart-to-heart talks and speeches in the second half of this episode. They get the shark jumping out of the way pretty quickly. So, Peter, how can people keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing?
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Volfranx. That's VULFRANX.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysarOursPodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, it's the introduction to a character who's going to stick around for a very, very long time. Richie's girlfriend, Lori Beth, in hardcover.
That is another milestone I am looking forward to. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Oh, the shark, babe, has such teeth, dear, and it shows them pearly white. Just a jackknife has old Maggie Heath, babe, and it keeps it out of sight. You know when that shark bites with its teeth, babe, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves, though, wears old Maggie Heath, babe, so there's never a trace of red.